Hello, and welcome back to Vita Activa. Last week's intervention was using maybe in response to negative thoughts. Maybe I'm not a klutz. Maybe I'm not just an addict. Maybe I can change. The subject was stress and its relationship to arousal, helplessness, and recovery. I've had some questions from viewers. My supposition is that if one person is asking these questions, 10 others have probably thought about them. So this week's work aims to clarify more about stress and stressors. First question, what's normal stress? My first inclination is to answer this question with an approach used in therapy. The distinction between normal and abnormal is statistical and therefore not very helpful. That distinction is unhelpful because what's normal for one person is completely abnormal for another. The more impactful question, which may underlie what's normal stress, is what is the distinction between healthy and unhealthy stress? People familiar with this channel will know that the word eudaimonia, Greek for well-spiritedness, is my choice of an optimum state of being. Happy is like the gorgeous but fleeting scent of magnolias in spring. Here and gone, here and gone. Well-spiritedness is an approach to life. Meet your challenges with optimism, courage, and resilience. The prefix in eudaimonia, eu, in Greek means well. That is also the prefix used for good stress, eustress. Eustress, interestingly, is less about the content of the stress than it is about how we meet that stressor. To answer that viewer's question in their terms, normal stress is stress we can deal with in a health-promoting process. Stress that causes permanent arousal, intrusions, sleeping difficulties, and isolation is traumatic stress and is not helpful. That said, one person's arousal-inducing stressor is another's day-to-day stressor. It's about us. It's not about the stressors as much. Second question, can we reach these peaks and valleys depending on the situation? The peaks and valleys referred to in the question are probably those from the arousal curve, which you should see now. If you look at that curve, what you find is that there are 2 points of low arousal, one on the lower left, one on the lower right of the curve. On the lower left, there's no motivation, no performance. On the lower right, there is overwhelming anxiety and no performance. The sweet spot is between the word performance and the word best performance on the curve. That's the best area that you want to be in. You've got some arousal approaching high, and you've got good to excellent performance. After the midpoint, you start to crash because anxiety takes over. So the direct answer to the question is our internal states can be performance enhancing or performance destroying. This is why I write about process. If we learn and practice health enhancing processes, we ought to be able to meet most stressors with a performance enhancing set of practices. For example, fully accept the reality of the situation and the range of possible outcomes. The example that comes to mind is that of the U.S. Admiral James Stockdale, who knew as he parachuted into enemy territory from his burning plane that he was entering the world of Epictetus, i.e., he had a copy of Epictetus's Enchiridion with him, and he deployed the lessons brilliantly through 7 years of torture and captivity. Fellow prisoners who had no such processes were not so fortunate and never saw home again. Stockdale did. Many of those who never saw home filled themselves with baseless hope. We will be out by Christmas. Stockdale reported that they died of broken hearts. What he told himself is that his only choice was to resist the enemy without dying and to have no expectations other than that he could control most of his own reactions. If you recall the first of these YouTube videos, it was on the value of evidence-based thinking, and that's exactly what Stockdale was using. If we list some of the factors that will help deal with stress, one, fully accept the reality of your situation. Two, list the range of possible outcomes, no matter how dire. Three, be disciplined in your self-dosing of emotion. Four, create repeatable patterns of exercise, connection, and changed environments. Five, don't nurture unrealistic hopes. That's a tentative list about how to think about your processes, but it is a starting point. What that starting point does is hopefully enable you to safely navigate both the peaks and valleys in favor of a well-spirited, goal-directed forward motion. Third question, I'm stressed, distracted, and incoherent. If I know the tools, why am I so fearful and anxious? Here's a way to visualize what you want and don't want to be. This is called blue line, red line. Okay. This diagram characterizes regulated versus dysregulated emotions and how dysregulation can stall a perfectly fine human life. There are a few points to focus on. First, notice that the blue line, which represents a values-driven life, is pointing upward. My sense is that a human life never really unfolds horizontally. We're moving forward or we're moving backward. Secondly, there's an angle and a momentum at which this life is moving. Think of the blue line as a vector. The angle and momentum change constantly. Thirdly, there are jagged blips or challenges on every blue line. Those are the hurdles we have to defeat or acquiesce to. Finally, there are red lines circling the two jagged blips. Those lines represent abandoning your values-driven life in favor of an emotions-driven life. As the drawing indicates, that broken red line just keeps on spinning around the blue blip. In psychology, that sort of compulsive anxiety has come to be called rumination. We chew and chew on the same issue with no real progress. So, I hear question 3, I'm stressed, distracted, and incoherent. If I know the tools, why am I so fearful and anxious? A few issues rise to the top. Probably the most important is becoming aware of one's own dysregulation. If you are ruminating, change something, especially something physical like your environment or your rate of movement. Go for a walk around the block. While you're walking around that block, please repeat this mantra. Knowing a tool is not practicing a tool. To practice a new tool is awkward, uncomfortable, and makes you feel a bit silly. But there's something important happening in those feelings. In that discomfort are signs of growth. After all, if growth were easy, I wouldn't have a job. Finally, the word incoherent deserves some attention. One of my first signs of anxiety is the rate, volume, and dynamics I see in a person's speech patterns. Faster, louder, and more staccato higher anxiety. Simply reducing the tempo, volume, and or rhythm of your speech can reduce your sense of incoherence significantly. The list of points that built these arguments today will be put on the screen, and you can read those. We'll try and leave enough time for you to read them all. This is also your intervention for the week. Don't just know the tools, use them daily. Thank you for thinking and acting. More next week. Be well.